Welcome to the Commercial Awareness Compass. This is your weekly guide to developing commercial insight that goes beyond just the news. So each week we focus on one major news story and we break it down for you to help you build your understanding at 3 levels: beginner, intermediate, and advanced. So whether you're new to commercial awareness or you already have some understanding, the goal here is for you to move up 1 level each week. We're going to break down today's story in a way that's easy to follow and gives you practical insights to use in your applications and your interviews. I'm Tori, I'm a future trainee solicitor, and I'm joined by Emma, who has extensive experience in commercial law. Today's session I'm super excited about. I think it's going to be really fun. We are talking about the weather and how the weather connects to commercial awareness. So as we go through the beginner, intermediate, and advanced levels, I encourage you to focus on how each explanation builds on the last. So really how we're moving from one level to the next. Focus first on understanding the basics, and then we're thinking about how different businesses and industries are impacted. And finally, then the strategic thinking that goes into helping clients manage these different challenges. The weather being a challenge that definitely many people are faced with. So let's chat about it. So Emma, do you want to introduce really what's going on weather-wise this week?
Of course, I'm happy to. So we are being ultra British today and talking about the weather, but I thought it'd be quite a nice aspect to look at because it is so general. So if you're struggling before an interview or before prepping for something to find something that you might be able to link commercial awareness to, this will prove to you that you can find it in anything. Whether this was in the news, and I mean it is extensively, but whether it was in the news or not, you could talk about the weather and how that could impact certain organisations. And just as Tori mentions, go through each of those stages. So to introduce it a little bit more, we are seeing lots of snowfall around the UK and of course impacting Ireland as well. And it's been quite bad over the weekend and today. I myself am snowed in. I can't go anywhere, not even out in the car. It's been quite bad to the point where it's impacted a lot of industries and will continue to do so. So breaking that down as to what that actually means will be quite helpful from commercial awareness point of view. Just to give you some hints and tips, there are, of course, airports and travel, but there's different avenues we can look at. So we can go down the direct impact of clients, but also the indirect, which we'll get more onto intermediate and advanced. But indirect, we're thinking about if people can't get around, businesses are impacted. And then, of course, if people can't get around and businesses are impacted, what does that look like to their profits and their commerciality in the market? So that's a little bit of a taster, Tori.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think this topic, again, is so great, like you explained, because everyone can understand this really well. I think when I first started learning commercial awareness, I was nervous in the sense that I thought it required me to learn really advanced, like understand really advanced, complicated things about business. So I think starting with the weather is cool because we all understand that the weather impacts our lives. And I think that your explanation there as well about how there's the direct impacts compared to the indirect impacts is also helpful. So at this beginner, at this basic level, I don't think we really need to explain too much to anyone about the weather. But I think that how you said that at this beginner level, we're thinking about the direct impacts. Did you want to say a little bit more about what are the kind of direct impacts that we could see?
Of course. So in the headlines, you can see that runways have been closed, right? So if your clients are in the aviation industry, you're automatically thinking about the impact there. If their runways are closed, they can't get passengers on planes. If you can't get passengers on planes, then of course there's going to be some sort of monetary impact of that, whether it's successful or not in those claims. Again, we'll get onto that, but it's going to put some sort of halt to a business, which means impact to commerciality and operations. You've got staff on the ground that aren't needing to work. There'll be different resource that you need. There's been lots more health and safety checks on the runways to make sure that they can be reopened at certain times. So it's reallocating resource. Have you got the right people available? All of these things require budget, some sort of strategic thinking and decisions. Board members are going to be discussing what do we do, who makes a decision to close, and then you've got health and safety and things like that. Aside from that, you've had railways. They're impacted, of course, the tracks, if they aren't safe enough to be operated on or to have passengers going through those, the same things might apply there. But when we're talking about operated on as well, think about the staff that work for, say, Network Rail, for example, that are expected to work the shifts to maintain the tracks. If the tracks are too icy, we all know where they can do that. If the tracks are too icy, then they can't possibly do that work. So are they being paid for it? Are they not? There's an employment law angle to it. You've also got electricity that's down. You've got those direct clients that will be impacted. We are paying for some sort of service of electricity. There's a contract behind that. If it's not being provided, what are the repercussions that might arise there? So those are the 3 examples of direct that I can think about. I'm sure there'll be lots more that you can as well. But if you pick those out from the headlines and you are interviewing with a firm that operates in some of those areas, I'm sure, if not more, that you'll discover, then that's the direct impact there of the weather.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I think that it's really useful, as you described as well, to think about how many different areas of law are engaged as well, that there's so many different areas of law that could be affected, and then therefore it could be relevant in so many different law firm interviews that you might have, depending on the practice areas that law firms operate in. So if we move then into the intermediate, I was thinking there's kind of 2 things that stuck out to me at this intermediate level, but also, you're the expert, so please elaborate. But for me, I was thinking that, one, you said there's kind of indirect impacts to look at. So I thought we could talk about that. And then the other thing I was thinking of was just at this intermediate stage, that's when we start thinking about what it is that lawyers are doing here. So really, because we've explained in the beginner level about what are the kind of issues that occur. What's the point at which you call the lawyer, or what are the lawyers doing at this point or in these issues?
It's a very good question, Tori. So if we use the indirect to explore that a little bit, because I think we've nodded towards the direct and beginner. The indirect, if people can't get around, if they've booked travel, if they are expected to be somewhere at a certain point in time and can't be, then businesses are going to be impacted. Let's take a very small example to make it easier. If I'm a consultant and I'm being paid lots of money by a high profile business to get on a plane and to be in America for a big job, and my plane's cancelled and I can't be there, what then happens with that contract? Is it force majeure? Some of you will be thinking, what is that language you're talking? Others might have heard of that before. Is it force majeure? Is it an act of God? Under the contract, is that consultant party alleviated of responsibility? Is there going to be some sort of dispute around that person not being able to be in America to deliver that job? Can it be delayed? What's the impact of the delay? So is it okay? Can you just get another meeting the next day? Or does it mean a whole project, like the whole timeline and delivery of a project is impacted that costs millions? All of these things are happening. That might just be one person. There's teams and teams of people that might be needing to travel for business reasons that have contractual clauses, or health and safety, or employment, or there might be an intellectual property discussion that's going on where somebody's trying to sign over a trademark. A lot of things can, of course, be done virtually nowadays, but also people need to be in some room somewhere if it's operational. So all of these different impacts that might happen might require a lawyer, of course, if the risk is sufficient and the monetary value is sufficient enough for somebody to justify paying money to a lawyer. These big consultancy companies will probably have a set law firm on hand, or the American, perhaps, industry or the company, the high profile company that was waiting for that consultant might go for a global firm that you're interviewing at and might say, listen, I need to raise a claim against this consultant company because they didn't make it and we've lost a lot of money as a result of it. That's where your lawyer will come in. Let's have a look at the dispute. Let's see if it's got any legs. Do we want to go all the way to court with it? Do we want to make some sort of commercial settlement? These are all of the things that you should be thinking about when you think, oh, travel disrupted, snow. Can you see how you can easily get to a commercial awareness of, from a firm point of view, but also a client? And I know I've just rambled on a little bit there, Tori, but I just want to introduce another indirect element that you could think about, which is cargo. So you're not only thinking about people. If goods, you've got goods and services, right? 2 main elements of commerciality. If goods can't get around either, how is that going to impact things? So there's different ways of exploring it, and there will be some element of your law firm your chosen law firm that you could use this as a talking point, Snow, commerciality, you will find it in one of those examples.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's super, super useful. I was thinking maybe we could move into the advanced, unless there was anything you wanted to add on the intermediate side of things.
No, I think we've covered that it's got to be justifiable to have a lawyer, because I think that is a good thing to explore further in advanced. So let's go to advanced, and if you don't mind, we'll lead with that decision around whether a client chooses a lawyer or not, because I think that's an important element of commercial awareness as well, if you agree, Tori.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was thinking this is a good theme, because it's more general, to talk about whether a client will instruct a lawyer or not. And there are, of course, there's a reality and a common sense to it. I wouldn't want those listening to see something like Snow and then have, think of some sort of scenario that's impacted, which might be correct, but then jump to a conclusion where a law firm will automatically be engaged, because that's not always going to be the case. The element of the business as a law firm also needs to be considered, and this is why we're in advanced. Also, the international aspect, which is on the ticker right now. So if you're reading that, don't worry, I'll get to that as well. The business as a law firm is important, because lawyers cost money, and we aren't cheap. We don't study for this amount of time to not charge appropriate fees, or the law firms, that's for sure. So you've got to think about and show some sort of awareness in your interviews as to how much a lawyer costs. If there is a consultancy agreement that is 10 grand and the loss caused to that company is going to be 20k, think about that. Might sound like a hell of a lot of money, and it is, right? But in the grand scheme of things, to a law firm, if you were going to get advice from a law firm and go all the way to court, it will likely cost you more than 20 grand. So why would you seek advice? If you've lost 20, you might need to think about different ways of recouping or coming to an agreement with the consultant that you'd suffered loss on because they didn't travel. So I just want to make sure, and it's exactly why I use the reason of multi-million pounds, that there's some sort of level of awareness around what is worthwhile a client pursuing and what is worthwhile a law firm dealing with as well. So I don't know if that made sense, Tori, if you've got any follow-up questions on it, but I just wanted to raise that first of all as a flag.
No, that absolutely made sense. I think that's really useful for our viewers to be aware of, for sure, because yeah, it's not necessarily the case that everything that could become a claim would be, that there really is that commercial thinking that goes into whether or not the claim is worth it as well. I guess my only follow-up question to that would be, what is the role of lawyers in advising clients as to that? Is it typically that a client would come to a lawyer and say, we have this potential claim, and then the lawyer would really give the client that information of if this is worth pursuing from that commercial viewpoint, if this is going to be worth it based on how much they would spend?
Yeah, another brilliant inquisitive question, Tori, thank you. Morally and ethically, the law firm should, and I imagine would, and I've been on the receiving end of this as well as being a client myself in-house, would advise and say, your chance of recovering this is, say I've got a claim for 100k, you've got a 50-50 chance of winning the case. So, you might get 100k if you win. However, your costs are going to be 50. Therefore, it might be worth you pursuing this. How much time is it going to take you to get that 50k back, which would be your overall profit? Is it worth your resource? If you've got 3 or 4 lawyers and quite a few senior people on it from your end, think about their salaries, work it out. Is it going to be worthwhile? And how much is that 50k worth to your company, depending on how big the company is? What the law firm will help you to do is to quantify the risk and assess it. They will probably also say to you, and this is something that the viewers will be doing in time, which is brilliant. You could say, I could do you a fixed fee of 15k for this advice. This is what will go into that. Of course, you're not going to overstretch the 15k, but the reason why you've capped it at 15 and the reason why you're not going to do more than 15k's worth of work is because you don't think it's worth it. Because what is the point reputationally? If I was a law firm and I took on tens and tens and hundreds of cases where I was getting paid more than I was getting my clients back if they were winning the case, they're not going to have a business, are they? So you've got the reputational element as well. So a law firm, to answer the short answer to your question, Tori, is yes, a law firm will be making that assessment, and that's all part of the commerciality that those lawyers are, trained so well in, and that awareness we're talking about now. Why do I need to be so commercially aware? It all comes into it. So yeah, great way to explore that. Thank you.
I think also helpful to see how commercial awareness is. It's not a skill that we will use only in our law firm interviews. It really is something that as a lawyer that you just need to know. There's a reason that we are needed to have this skill. So thank you for explaining that. I also thought we could come on to, because you were mentioning this international element and how that connects to the advanced level as well. Could you say a bit more about that?
Yeah, so if there was a super advanced level, I would be mentioning it now. But the international aspect could involve a lawyer operating across multiple jurisdictions. So, of course, we have the jurisdiction of England and Wales, which the majority listening, I guess, will qualify into. But Ireland have their own, Scotland, and of course, I mentioned America, pretty self-explanatory, but they've got different ones in each state. That's above my knowledge, but that's the extent that I know. So if you're thinking international law, whether, yes, it might just be snowy in England right now or parts of the UK, but if it's impacting cross-border transactions, you've got different jurisdictions. Some lawyers are dual, multi-qualified even since Brexit. Lots of people decided to diversify and be qualified in other areas. Others aren't. So law firms that are multi-service and are global will be thinking about this as well. So if you're interviewing for a law firm that isn't just one that's based in the UK, which is, I guess, the majority, a huge majority of them nowadays, if you're interested in the global or the international law aspect of things, you don't have to be qualified in the different jurisdictions to be interested in it. This awareness now will really help you to get your foot in the door, just thinking a little bit wider. So under a contract, there will be a jurisdiction and a governing law clause. The contracts that I mainly work with, or those that are viewing potentially will work with in future, will be this contract is governed by the laws of England and Wales, and the courts of England and Wales have exclusive jurisdiction to deal with these disputes. That just means it's under our laws, and if there's an issue, you'll go to a court that's local. Other contracts might be governed by the jurisdiction or the court in which the operation is within. So you've got to see where that is. Depending on the bargaining power of each party, we mentioned the consultancy. If the American company insisted that that contract was governed by American law, you might have a little English consultant that would have to fly to America to have a court case heard, which means more money. So you're thinking about disputes and how all of this happens. From the law firm point of view, you'll also have different people with different specialities working on it, but you might be working really closely with your American counterpart within the same firm. So there's that element. I know there's lots to explore there, Tori, but that's what I meant by international.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, super interesting. I think also because in a contract that jurisdictional clause is often very short, so I feel like it doesn't actually reflect the significance of that clause, that when you're deciding what jurisdiction that it's in, that could have a serious impact. Like you say, people might need to fly to be in court. So thank you so much for explaining that. I had this final thought on the advanced level. I was just picturing myself in a law firm interview if I was to be talking about the weather and the various legal issues that can arise from the weather. And if I was trying to reflect on it from this advanced level and really be taking a big picture view and seeing broader trends, I think I inevitably would also think about climate change and about the possibility of there being an increased frequency of extreme weather events. Do you think that is something that a student could talk about in this context, or if there's a way to link that as well to commercial awareness?
Absolutely, Tori, please do. Because if you think about a law firm that is thinking strategically in the way that you've just done, which would be, it would blow my socks off if I was interviewing you and you mentioned that, to be honest, to be thinking proactively, strategically, and of the impact on a law firm. If this is going to be, if a research paper was published, that it was proven, or I'm sure that again, showing my lack of knowledge. This is why research is really important. But that there's a proved likelihood that this was going to happen more, we were going to get more prolonged snow. Well, think that through. If we're talking about the issues that we have been here, and a law firm is sat there thinking, of course they've got their concerned hats on about climate change. I'm not saying that they haven't, but they're rubbing their fingers together thinking, I've got an opportunity to get more work here. And if I'm not resourced adequately, if I don't have the lawyers that can deal with this increase of business that's going to be handed to me on a plate as a result of macro elements, i.e. the weather, and I've not got the lawyers that can deal with climate change clauses in contracts, how spotting trends around certain firms might be impacted and how to alleviate their liability. Because there's both sides, right? You've got defence and then the side that's raising it. You might be working for a firm that's always going to be a company that's always impacted by it, and you want to protect them. So planning ahead, absolute Tory, brilliant. And thinking of, like the overall trends wider than the weather and what could be causing it, and how as a business you can become more profitable as a result of these things that are happening. Yes, if you can mention that in a way, like, or even just throwing it in at the end, I'm pretty sure as a candidate you'd be remembered by those interviewers, definitely.
Thanks so much for reflecting on that. I don't know that I have other questions. I think that we've covered the beginner, intermediate, and advanced, I think, really well in a way that feels like it hopefully will be super useful to our viewers. Is there anything that you wanted to add about this topic or anything else?
Just not to discredit the stories or the happenings around you that you might think aren't relevant. There's law everywhere and commerciality everywhere, and we've gone from some lovely little white snowflakes falling from the sky to looking at strategic business decisions. So definitely to take those into account. But thanks for your great questioning, Tori. I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Ellen. Thanks so much for your insight. And I love that note to end on as well, because again, I think when I first started working on my commercial awareness, it was really daunting to think about reading these news articles that maybe I never would have read otherwise, and then trying to figure out these areas of law that are, or areas of business that are completely unfamiliar to me. But I think, encouraging our viewers to start with the things that are familiar to you, start with the weather that you see around you, and think about how that can connect to your commercial awareness. I think for me, that seems like something that could make it feel a lot less scary. So thank you so much for that explanation. And thank you to our viewers for joining us for today's Commercial Awareness Compass. Please remember that commercial awareness, it's not just about staying on top of the news. It's really about understanding why these events matter to clients and how you, as a future lawyer, can provide strategic value to your clients. So whether you're at the beginner stage, intermediate, or advanced level, the key takeaway for you today really is to approach each story curiously with an analytical mindset. And then, like we've just been talking about as well, don't discredit the things that seem maybe not that interesting or not that commercial to you. You can really connect them to the law in any way. So good luck. Please join us next week to keep building your commercial awareness. And until then, prepare without the panic.